Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We just wanted to say before we begin, just to send your email in the chat, grab a notebook, put yourself on mute. I think everyone's done that. So awesome. And welcome to our presentation, Loving the Multicultural Family of God, How to Practice Diversity on Earth as It Is in Heaven.
We are so excited that you guys are here. We've been working tirelessly on this thing, and we really hope that it's helpful for you. We hope that makes you think. We hope that, hold on, I need to tell my husband to shut the door if he could possibly do that, because I'm echoing. Sorry, babe. Thank you. So we hope that it is helpful. We hope that you walk away with tools that actually practically help you love the multicultural people of God and not just tolerate them.
That's good. I wanted to start with a liturgy from the book Every Moment Holy. I know you guys have probably heard Martin come read out of this book, but just wanted to get us started with the liturgy for the labors of community. Our lives are so small, O Lord, our vision so limited, our courage so frail, our hours so fleeting. Therefore, give us grace and guidance for the journey ahead. We are gathered here because we believe that we are called together into a work we cannot yet know the fullness of. Still, we trust the voice of the one who has called us. And so we offer to you, O God, these things, our dreams, our plans, our vision. Shape them as you will, our moments and our gifts. May they be invested toward bright eternal ends. Richly bless the work before us, Father. Shepherd us well, lest we grow enamored of our own accomplishment or entrenched in old habit. Instead, let us listen for your voice, our hearts ever open to the quiet beckonings of your spirit in this endeavor. Let us in true humility and poverty of spirit remain ever ready to move at the impulse of your love in paths of your design. You alone, O Lord, by your gracious and life-giving spirit, have power to knit our imperfect hearts, our weaknesses, our strengths, our stories, and our gifts, one to another. Unite your people and multiply our meager offerings, O Lord, that all might resound to your glory. May our acts of service and creation, frail and wanting as they are, be met and multiplied by the mysterious workings of your Spirit, who weaves all things together toward a redemption more good and glorious than we yet have eyes to see or courage to hope for. May our love and our labors now echo your love and your labors, O Lord. Let all that we do here in these our brief lives, in this our brief moment to love, in this the work you have ordained for this community, flower in winsome and beautiful foretaste of greater glories yet to come. O Spirit of God, now shape our hearts. O Spirit of God, now guide our hands. O Spirit of God, now build your kingdom among us. Amen.
Amen. All right, friends, we are going to get started. We are starting off with where we are all starting off, because you can't get to where you're going unless you know where you're starting from, right? So you might be here and you might know that diversity is a reality of the kingdom of God, but you feel stuck in like a homogenous bubble and you don't really know how to get out of it or how to expand that bubble. Or you might be here because 2020 really opened your eyes to why diversity is so important and you're looking for more information on what to do next. Or maybe you understand how the heart behind something like the Black Lives Matter movement or the Me Too movement is intertwined with the mission of God, but you're still afraid that you're going to do or say something wrong. So if any of those things resonate with you, you are in the right place and we're happy to have you here.
So what you'll get from this workshop is to learn what multicultural competency is, learn how to employ the multicultural competency in order to practice diversity and unity and diversity as well. And then lastly, just to get next steps.
So if we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I am Jess.
I'm Kate.
I, Jessica, am a second generation Mexican American. My father immigrated here from Mexico when he was 5 with his mom and his sister. I am a self-proclaimed chocolate chip cookie connoisseur. hold on. I was saying chocolate chip connoisseur, but that's not the same thing. I'm a chocolate chip cookie connoisseur. I like all the sweet treats, but chocolate chips are my jam. I'm a new wife and a stepmama. I'm a family photographer, and I'm a Point Loma Nazarene School of Theology graduate.
And my name is Caitlyn Gajo. I'm self-described European mosaic of genes. It's a mouthful, but basically my family is from England, Germany, Romania, and Norway. And I love road trips. I've done like 5 in the last year. I'm a wife, a mother of 2. I'm a wellness consultant for Sharp Health Plan and a Mercy and Justice Director for Risen.
So we're going to get started with the basics, which is basically just things that we already know. And we're here because we know that diversity is an integral part of the kingdom of God. And where we really get our probably clearest vision of why that is in the book of Revelation. John describes seeing the people of God, God's church, as a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, all tribes, all peoples and languages. And if you really think about the nitty-gritty of what that means to be in a great multitude of all people from every nation, tongue, tribe, and language, we can agree that it would probably get a little bit messy, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever lived next to neighbors that aren't from your particular culture, but maybe your Latin neighbors party way too late and get way too loud. Maybe your neighbors from England are a little more reserved and don't really want to talk to you, or whatever the case may be. Different cultures coming together in the same space could potentially get really messy, because true diversity is messy. We're not all the same, we're different, but we're unified.
And I think that was really important by a quote that I saw by Lamar Hardwick. He's the author of Disability in the Church. He says, peace is not the absence of differences, but rather the presence of a united community despite the differences.
So we believe that true diversity requires multicultural competency, but you might be here thinking, what the heck does that even mean? Because that's what I thought when Caitlyn first said the word multicultural competency to me.
Yes. So let's define the terms. What is multicultural competency? It just means having 3 things: awareness, knowledge, and skills about culture and cultural differences. Culture doesn't only pertain to race and ethnicity. Every group of people has a culture, from Star Wars fans to offices to sports enthusiasts, business cultures. It's just shared traditions, beliefs, customs, history, and institutions of a people group. So developing multicultural competency is really a journey. It's not a static point of arrival. So we're always learning, right? The bottom line is just, we really just want to be understanding, loving, and relating to people that are different than you. So let's define some more terms. Part of this understanding and defining terms is just really helpful for us to love our fellow image bearers. So I think it's good to just know what each of these terms mean. Diversity is just the presence of differences within a given setting, which that could be along the lines of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, and any other sociodemographic variable. So it's just having the presence of that. Whereas inclusion is building a culture of belonging by welcoming and valuing all voices. And then equality is sameness. So it's just giving the same thing equally. Whereas equity, where we want to look more at, is fairness and giving support to those who have barriers, right? And systemic barriers are a lack of access to care, education, and economic resources. Really just obstacles that exclude groups of people from full participation in and or benefits of like social, economic, and political life. So these could be hidden or unintentional. They're often built into the way our society works. So they could be reinforced by policies, practices, procedures, stereotypes, so many other things. But those are some of the definitions that we wanted to define first as we start. So here's an example of equality versus equity. And I realize the representation isn't great. They're all white. But I really liked this picture because in the first image, it's assumed everyone will benefit from the same supports, right? They're all being treated equally. The second image, it shows equity. Individuals are given different supports to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. They're being treated equitably. And then in the third image, all three can see the game without any supports or accommodations because that inequity was removed, or it was addressed and the systemic barrier was removed. So to me, the third picture is justice. Like nothing is wrong with any of these people, but because of systemic barriers, it's more difficult to access resources. So as Christians, we should be moved to address these obstacles that can be oppressive, right? Luke 4:18-19 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor."
So on our journey towards justice, we want to really move from being colorblind to culturally competent. And the reason for that is because there was a time not too long ago where it was probably considered progressive to be colorblind, right? Like that was like the nice thing to say. I don't see color. I don't see your disability. I don't see your gender. I don't see your sexual orientation. I don't see any of those things. I just see that we are one human race. And while that sounds really nice, and it sounds like the nice person thing to do, it's actually completely negating all of our differences and the things that make our personhood. And then when we ignore and negate people's stories and their struggles and the experiences they have based on their gender, race, sexual orientation, their ability, anything like that, we actually are doing the reverse of what we think we're doing. We're dehumanizing that person rather than including them and valuing them in a culture of welcoming, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So we have put together 5 sort of steps that we are going to be taking in order to move from being colorblind to culturally competent. And the first one of those steps is going to be self-acceptance. So self-acceptance kind of sounds like a funny place to start. It sounds a little like woo-woo and like something that your therapist might throw at you, which is maybe why you don't go to therapy. But bear with me because it really is the crucial step into really valuing other cultures of any kind. And we're going to start with a quote by Brene Brown because I think she's amazing. And honestly, if you get a chance to Google her TED Talks, her podcasts, anything that Brene Brown has to say, like just listen to it. She's a shame researcher, shame and vulnerability researcher. And she says this: empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice. In order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. So self-acceptance really is the basis for being able to accept others and being able to love others. And the first step in self-acceptance is for us as Christians, we believe, to accept our status as beloved, right? This is really the foundation for any Christian's identity. First and foremost, we are loved by God. And that is the kind of where our identity really begins and in no sense really ends, is that we're just loved. It's not about our job. It's not about our socioeconomic status. It's not about our ability or our gender or anything like that. Our first and foremost status is that we are loved. The next step, accepting your origin story, may be a little bit more tricky. So accepting your origin story really has to do with accepting your ethnic origin. For me, any origin story of where you are placed in a group, not just ethnicity. But accepting your origin story is going to be harder for some of us than it is for others. I know for me, the origin story that was really hard for me to accept was that I was Mexican. And that was because my experience in middle school and high school was that I was sort of praised for being whitewashed or very light skinned. And so I started to internalize really negative feelings about being Mexican. And so it was really hard for me to begin to accept that I, A, was Mexican, and B, God made me that way and it was good. And so I say that accepting your origin story is going to be difficult for some and not so difficult for others, because sometimes our origin stories are what we would consider normal, right? What is probably part of the majority is better to say than normal, because accepting your origin story is going to take, perhaps for some of us, a lot of deconstruction of ideas that we didn't even know that we had until we come up against them. So that's going to be a little bit trickier. It's going to take a little bit of time. I know for me, it probably took me like 2 years to even start saying like, I'm Mexican and that's a good thing and I'm proud of it because God made me that way. The third part is reclaiming your family of origin or your origin story. Reclaiming your origin story is different from accepting it, because it's less about dealing with the emotions of it and more about implementing the practice of your origin story. So that might look like researching your family history, figuring out where your family's from, and implementing certain traditional dishes into your weekly family dinners. It might look like putting a traditional song from your family of origins country in your Spotify playlist. It might even look like learning the language of your family and where they came from. But all of that is going to be a reclaiming of your family of origin.
So the second part of awareness, this is like the awareness piece of multicultural competency, is uncovering our unconscious bias. And I know that's kind of a scary word, but unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias. It's just underlying attitudes and stereotypes that people unconsciously attribute to another person or group of people that affect how they understand and engage with a person or group. And we develop unconscious biases by overrepresentation in the media, narratives, stories, our own personal experiences, maybe the way we were raised. So part of that is we want to uncover that and not be quiet and talk about it and acknowledge it. So I really like this quote from Latasha Morrison. She has an organization called Be the Bridge. It's really great. She just says, I won't stay silent and let the sin of racism ravage what God created as good. And she's referencing racial and ethnic diversity. So the uncovering our unconscious bias, how to. First of all, we always want to practice preaching the gospel to ourselves. I mean, this is something we have to do hourly, honestly. Acknowledging our sin, letting it be, bringing it before the Lord, believing it is finished, and believing God when he says to you, I am beloved in light of my sin or bias. And then believing God's forgiveness is bigger than your sin or the undignified way you treated the image bearer. That's something that we have to do all the time. I think that's so helpful for this. And then also taking an implicit association test. This helps us really see the areas we normally do not acknowledge in terms of how we view the world and different people groups. And this just helps us predict behavior so we can avoid making choices or taking action based on biases across sociodemographic variables like race, gender, sexual orientation, age, religion, things like that. And then we want to talk about identifying areas where subtle acts of exclusion are prevalent. And subtle acts of exclusion is kind of like the new term for microaggressions because it's more helpful in understanding. These can just be very brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, environmental indignities. They can be intentional or unintentional. It communicates hostile, derogatory, and negative prejudicial slights and insults toward any group. It could be, and it's particularly culturally marginalized groups, and they can be really mean and isolating. So I just wanted to show you guys a clip of kind of explaining this a little bit better.
you don't look gay.
I'm like, did you hear that? People, before they even hear me talk, expect that I don't speak English that well.
Oh, you're cute to be fat. I've been told that.
Oh, well, you know, you millennials are always on the phone.
Or they think you can't hear because you're in a wheelchair.
It's always, oh, well, you did that pretty well for a female.
So you need to stop and listen.
I just want to be able to talk about issues that come up and then move past them.
So our third step in moving toward cultural competency is part of our knowledge, part of the knowledge piece of cultural competency. We named it Pass the Mic. And it's really this idea that you and the group that you are a part of are not the only group that has a way of doing things, or even really has like the right way or the normal way of doing things. So we pulled a quote from Esau Macaulay, and it's about this idea of listening to groups as a whole, and not just finding the people that think like you. So he says, he tweeted this actually, and he said, "Can you imagine scrolling past hundreds and thousands of Black Christians saying the same thing to find the one or two Black Christians who say what you want to hear the way you want to hear it, and thinking, finally, somebody gets it. We are not a monolith, but consensus matters. I'm not mad at those Black Christians who come to disagree honestly. I'm frustrated at how they are weaponized against the 97% to justify continued apathy." Esau Macaulay is Black, and he is talking about how generally when talking about specifically about systemic racism, the majority culture will tend to gravitate towards voices that are affirming what they believe and completely ignoring the consensus of the group. So how to practically pass the mic, because this one can get a little bit tricky. I don't know if there are any persons of color on this call that have ever been called out in a classroom to give the Latin perspective on a subject, or the Asian American perspective on a subject. But kind of like Esau Macaulay was saying, is that we're not a monolith of people, right? Like not every disabled person is going to be able to speak for every other disabled person. Not every woman is going to be able to speak for every woman. But consensus definitely matters. So in order to avoid, calling on the one person outside the majority that you know, in order to get like that group's perspective, we are going to start listening to the stories of other people groups. That's going to be all about building relationships with people, because you're going to need to be in relationship with people who are telling stories. And the thing is that there are people telling their story everywhere. We just have to be willing to listen to them. The second part of passing the mic how-to is to put your vantage point in perspective. And this really coincides with number 3, which is to practice humility. It's very easy when we are in our own groups and we feel that we are the majority or we're the normal perspective, to believe that we have the way of doing things, that our way of doing things is just the way to do things. But that's not true. There are many, many groups of people who do the same things that we do, but do them differently, or get to the end result with a different way of doing them, I guess you could say. So practicing humility is going to be huge for passing the mic, because it's also going to, other groups are going to say things about your group that can potentially make you feel like you're being attacked. So practicing humility is really a posture, and it's a practice. And it's something where you have to really do what Philippians says to do, or what Paul in Philippians says to do. He says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." So again, this is a practice of looking to the interest of others and of considering others as more, counting them as more significant than ourselves. Oh, this one's mine too. Sorry.
Mhm.
Okay, so considering the source, this one actually has been super significant for Caitlyn and myself personally. This is part of the knowledge aspect of cultural competency. And I really love this quote by Sho Baraka because I think it really encapsulates this idea of considering the source. He says, we not only need a theology about the poor, but we need a theology from the poor. And this idea of considering the source is less about, I guess you could say it's more about considering who is speaking, who is telling the story, and is that story a fair assessment of a certain group or subject or anything? Because a lot of times we get a lot of stories about certain groups, but we don't get a lot of stories from within that group. And so considering the source is really going to help us understand the group better because we are going to be listening for the sources inside the group. So the first step in doing that is to diversify your bookshelf. And this, Caitlyn can tell you from personal experience, has been like wild. Definitely perspective shifting. To read about a subject that you think that you know very well from a completely different perspective from the other end of that subject it will rock your world. So diversifying your bookshelf and making sure that you don't just have authors of the same physical ability, the same gender, the same socioeconomic standing, the same sexual orientation, the same race, all of those things. You want to diversify that and make sure that you're hearing from other groups because their perspectives matter and their perspectives are different. And we're missing pieces of the puzzle when we don't have all the perspectives on a given subject. Number two is pretty easy. Expand your media consumption. So a lot of times when we watch the news, I'm guilty of this. I usually will only watch one news channel, get my news, and then I'm good for the day. Expanding your media consumption and the information that you're getting about the world that you're living in will really help you see from outside of your own perspective. And a way that you can do that is very simple. You could watch something like BBC News, which is news from Europe. You could easily mix up your newspapers where you get that from. So just expanding your media consumption to something a little bit more than just one slant and one perspective. Number three is where it gets really fun, I think, for me. Start asking who wrote, who directed, who produced this content, right? We are content like consuming machines. Everything from Instagram to Facebook to TikTok to TV, everything that we're consuming was created by a person. That person has an opinion, they have experiences, they have all of these things, right, that go into their content. And if we're not checking who is creating that content, then we're doing our diversity muscles a disservice, right? We're not flexing that inclusion muscle, I guess you could say. So asking these questions before we consume our content is really crucial.
That's good. Okay, so the last piece of multicultural competency is interpersonal skills. I think a big part of that is practicing mindfulness. I know it sounds kind of weird maybe to you, but mindfulness really is just a mental practice that involves having awareness while paying attention to the present moment. So John Kabat-Zinn says mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So if you come to that non-judgmental, caring, open attitude while you're practicing, it can help with communication strategies and interpersonal skills. So we wanted to do a little mindfulness practice with you guys to help us become aware, caring, and non-judgmental.
Hi, and welcome to Headspace. So no matter what's going on in your life right now, no matter how many thoughts are racing around your mind, no matter how the body's feeling, just take a moment to sit down and take a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. As you breathe out, a sense of letting go of any stress in the body, in the mind, just feeling the muscles soften and relax. And close your eyes if you'd like to. One more. Breathing deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a moment to pause. Allow the thoughts to come and go. And then just gently opening the eyes again.
So that is just helpful for staying in the present moment, right? Headspace is an awesome app for that. There's so many things you can just YouTube. They have like 2 to 3 minute mindfulness practices, meditations, breath prayers are great, like just coming into that moment. So anyway, that starts coming to that. When you become more aware with the present moment, then you can have better communication strategies. And a couple of those interpersonal communication strategies are Appreciative Inquiry. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's really just focusing on the person's interests, learning about their values, their worldviews, their priorities, and building them up and appreciating them as you communicate with them. So I just think that's really helpful to remember those things when you're communicating, especially when somebody has a different worldview than you. And then motivational interviewing, that is used by counseling and coaches a lot of times. But I think it's super helpful for just basic communication styles. And it's basically just empathic, supportive, collaborative, non-confrontational communication. And the 4 key communication skills used are open-ended questions. So asking just open-ended things, having affirmations, reflective and empathetic listening, and then summarizing what the person said. So I think those are really helpful when you do have difference in opinions, trying to understand different people groups. And lastly, become a peacemaker, right? Like God calls us to become peacemakers. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. We pulled from Global Immersion Project, the way that they do their peacemaking strategies. They use SEE, which just means everyday peacemakers see the humanity, dignity, and image of God in everyone. Immerse, and everyday peacemakers move toward conflict with tools to heal rather than to win the argument. I am definitely guilty of this, so don't think I know all the things, but this is just super helpful. Contend, everyday peacemakers contend not by getting even, but getting creative in love. And then lastly, restore. Everyday peacemakers share tables with former enemies and celebrate the big and small ways God is restoring our broken world. I just thought that was really helpful with kind of ending the whole entire piece of multicultural competency with the skills.
Yes, Queen, you did it. It's the end of it, you guys. We're so proud of you for sticking with us. This can be a really heavy topic, and so we're grateful that you stayed to the end.
Yeah, we just wanted to add this little piece at the end. Jess made this for our community group when we were talking through just understanding people. And I just thought it was so helpful, good reminder to say this to yourself, to remember in your next conversations, in your journey to becoming multicultural competent with others. I'm created in the image of God. How I act shows the world what God is like. How I treat other image bearers reveals what I think of God. So I just thought that was a good reminder for you guys.
So your next steps, if you are coming to the end of this thinking, okay, great, this is awesome, now what? I am not doing anything. We as a church are hosting the Big Story class. This is a 6-week course that gives us a framework for important topics like diversity. Diversity belongs under the story of God as God designs it. So you're going to learn all about the big story that God is telling with all of humanity and our part in God's story and how we can participate in that story. So you're going to go through creation, fall, redemption, and what restoration looks like. This begins on Wednesday, I believe, the 24th at 7:30 p.m. And I believe Martin has a link that he's going to put in the chat that you can sign up for this course. I highly recommend. I have not gone through it, but I do love the big story concept. And so if you guys want to find a way to help your faith really, to help ground your faith, I guess, in the here and the now, this is the class that you want to be in.
Yeah, yeah. And we're also going to send you guys a reflection and kind of how we can debrief and go through a bit more with you guys on multicultural competency. So that's why we asked you to put your emails in there. So thank you guys so much. Please ask questions if you have any.